Hi, podcast friends. My guest today is Jasmine Bellamy, who is a love scholar practitioner, joyful disruptor, and business and culture transformer. She is the founder of Love 101 Ministries, dedicated to the theology and practice of love, and hosts the Call to Love experience. Jasmine also leads The Loving Leader, a purpose-driven consultancy transforming leaders and workplace cultures from the inside out. She holds degrees, multiple of them, you all, Syracuse University, Fordham University, an MBA, and Fuller Seminary, a second master's degree in theology, where she is currently pursuing a fourth degree, a doctorate in global leadership. Her work integrates faith, scholarship, and strategy to reimagine the marketplace as a space for redemptive love and transformation. I met Jasmine on a sidewalk a couple of months ago and instantly connected with her warmth and her work. I can't wait to hear details about what makes you, you, Jasmine, and more about this work. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm great. Thank you so much. It's so good to be here with you.
I'm going to dive in with, I would like to know first, when you were growing up, who is someone that you would say, as you were growing up, becoming you and becoming into yourself, who taught you about the life worth living?
I mean, if we go back to my childhood, my mother is the first person that comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as an adult, I would say my pastor,
Okay.
J.R. Bernard, but as a child, for sure, my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I think of what that looks like, my mother came from very challenging family circumstances, but also she was the joyful disruptor, and that she decided there was going to be something different for her family. And so I always think about the stories of, when my brother was little, her, working and then also going to grad school, and the, the her work ethic to be able to bring to life the vision that she had for life, for her family, that was not even the vision or the lived experience that she had. So that connection between you can transform from what you had and
Mm-hmm.
vision something else and live into it,
Mm-hmm.
not for just yourself, but for those you love. And so I'm always really in awe when I look back at her circumstances, but look at the circumstance she created for my brother and I,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that she didn't necessarily have a model for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's funny as you ask that question, I see so much of how I move through this world because of that experience with her.
I'd also love to know about now. And so
Mm-hmm.
you had mentioned your
Mm-hmm.
pastor. Is this the person that you would say, or one of the people who you look to for guidance? And if not just this person, like who do you look to for guidance?
Yeah. So first I'll say my pastor, Bernard, is absolutely the most influential person of my adult life, hands down,
Mm,
not another human. And it's funny, for the past 27 years, I have been in a mega church. So it's not necessarily from proximity,
ah,
but it's through teaching, it's through consistency, it's through example, it's through wisdom. He was a role model for me of what it is to have an audacious faith. And at the same time, the discipline and the self reflection and the introspection to continue to live a faith that you take great responsibility for.
mm-hmm,
He was a banker before he started what was then called Household of Faith, in his living, which is
mm-hmm.
now in a building that seats over 5,000 people and then one of the largest facilities in New York. Mm. But he's just been so consistent over those 27 years. And I had the great pleasure of actually being able to honor him publicly recently and be able to like literally look him in the eye and tell him what he has meant to me. So he is definitely the living person who is the most influential to me. And then I would also then say, while there are many, there's one person that I consider my patron saint, and that's Bell Hooks.
Yeah.
And so she is definitely the person that I believe in a way that I am of her lineage, that she was saying 20 years prior to me reading, like she was speaking my life 20 years before I lived it. So
Wow.
every time I approach her, she is speaking directly to me and saying the things that I may not have yet had language for, but I just knew intuitively. It is like that all the time with her. So she's literally 20 years my senior. And I always feel like as she is saying it, I am often saying, that's exactly right. That's exactly it. And now I have language for it. So like I called myself a love practitioner before I ever knew she was one,
Mm.
so she's definitely, I would say, the other person called. I've declared both her birthday and the date she passed a feast day. So
I love that.
yeah, she is quite special to me.
For people who may not be aware of what a feast day looks like, what does that
Yes.
look like for you?
Oh, so I just celebrated. Well, I'll share how I celebrated both. So on her birthday, I happened to be invited to offer a brief workshop. And so I literally launched with her words as our point of reflection in framing out what it looks like to live a life of love in a beautiful community of beloved contemplatives. And it looked like placing a book of hers on our community altar where we were honoring ancestors. And then she died on December 15th, 3 years ago.
Mm.
I decided that day one, I would write about her. So I have this beautiful journal with a picture of her on the cover that someone had made for me. So I wrote in that journal that day, happened to have a particular podcast episode that was dedicated to remembering her. So I went back
Mm.
and listened to that podcast episode. And then I grabbed one of her books, All About Love, and really just went through the dog-eared pages and the highlights and just sat in her brilliance and her wisdom on that day. So that's how I honored her.
Love so much about this for listeners. And you can have people that you look to for guidance that have passed away. They can be people that you've never met in person. They can be people that, or maybe you've met them in passing, but you don't know them extremely well as a friend or something like that. But they can have this tremendous impact on your life. And so if you're listening and you're wondering who might guide me, it might be someone who's an author. It might be someone who you listen to their speeches or you look at their artwork and they inspire you and your life in whatever form that looks like for you. And secondly, you can have feast days that honor people in your life, that honor your own practices, that honor your own, like, I think that these are days that you really focus on what makes life worth living, on who you want to be and who you're trying to become and who you already are, on the people who have most shaped you. That's amazing. What would you say are other maybe daily practices or weekly practices that really ground you in a sense of what it takes for you to live a meaningful life?
Yeah. Most definitely silence and
Mm.
solitude for sure. Those in many ways I don't know that I would have the capacity to live the life that I live if it weren't for those practices. And mine may be a lot of time in comparison to what people may feel comfortable with, and that's fine. I think you could start with a couple of minutes. Counsel, in spiritual direction, I've said to people, even if that means you just close your eyes and you take a couple of breaths, that's your intention to give yourself that silence and solitude as a gift. But silence and solitude for me, every morning I wake up, so I used to be a person who would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, jump out of bed, go to the gym, get my workout done and all these things. I am not that person today. The person that I am today really honors the sacredness of awakening. And so for me, and your bestie Michaela receives this often. I'll say, I just received this morning because things come to me in that transition moment between sleeping and awaking.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I get so much wisdom. That becomes the moment where I really have processed, where I have really, where something arises because I've had the space to process. And now all of a sudden I see further than I could before. So that morning time for me is absolutely sacred. And I honor it by acting. So when it's clear to me, I go. So, we were chatting before we began even about, upcoming retreat. It was that kind of thing. Someone said something a few days before, and in that awakening time, I literally had a vision. I could see it really clearly. And I was like, I sent an email to the retreat center I want to work with and laid it all out. I'm like, I got a clear vision now. I'm ready to work, So, but I wait. I won't do anything until I know I have really been given the runway to. So there's a discipline in it. I'm just not running all over the place. But when that clarity comes, I know it becomes my responsibility to. And so I do think this idea of praxis, this idea of reflection and action are the practices that I lean into on a daily basis. And for me, if you want to call it the seeding ground almost of that is silence and solitude and stillness.
I resonate so deeply with that bit of time upon awakening of allowing other than I have stillness and silence other than my coffee pot, going, but I gotta have
Yes.
that. I gotta have the coffee brewing.
Of course. Of course.
But yeah, but I really resonate with that. One thing that you've told me is that everything that you do, whether it's ministry or spiritual direction, and by the way, the link to Jasmine's website is going to be in the guest notes for this episode. And so I'm imagining they can reach out to you through your website for spiritual direction consultancy, right? So if you're listening to Jasmine right now and you're thinking, oh, wow, I could use a consultant like Jasmine. I could use a spiritual director like her in my life. You'll be able to reach out to her through her website. But everything you do, leadership formation, business consulting, one-on-one consulting, it's all rooted in love. You're a love practitioner, as you were saying, similar to the way, exactly as Bell Hooks talked about her work and who she felt she was. How do you define love?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. For me, I really do begin with the invitations to love that are in scripture. This idea that God is love, that it is the nature of God, and therefore becomes the attribute of the humans that God has created. And that love is this. And I love this vision of a three-legged stool, this love of God, love of self, love of other. And that if any of those legs of the stool are imbalanced, we know what happened. So for me, it really is about what does it look like to be living and embodying a life of love that is centered in love of God, love of self, and love of others. And I think mainly this this idea of seeing each other as love is really what drives or is the undercurrent of the work that I do. But I do see love also as the most transforming agent. I don't, what I don't define it as is the cultural lens that tends to either be solely familiar or solely romantic. I see it as this how we see each other in humanity. Period. Full stop. Agape, unconditional love is it the base of how I see love. And the interesting thing, part of the work that I'm doing is to help with some definitions of love in context, in new context, because part of the challenge is we tend to think about the cultural ways that we see love, and there's a more holistic way to see love, and also understanding that most of what we call love isn't love. And so knowing that part of this journey is also helping people really redefine and reshape what it is to love. I'm constantly scrolling social media and seeing the word love being used. And when you hear the settings, I'm like, but that's actually not love. So you're actually mislabeling this behavior as love, and it's actually not.
Could you give an example of what it isn't that sometimes people
Yeah.
think it is?
Yeah. I will definitely start with, we'll use the image of a servant that we often think love looks like just doing what everybody wants to be done. And so we think when we then have the resentment that's built up because we're just supposed to keep sacrificing and giving because that's what everybody else wants, we think that that's love.
Hmm.
And what I often share with people is that moment that the sacrifice is no longer a gift, it's no longer love. When resentment is the fruit, it's no longer love.
I've been thinking a lot about resentment the last few months, and I was listening to someone talk about it who said that resentment, the reason why it gets deep in our souls and is so difficult for us and so bad for our souls is that there's an initial hurt that happens, whether we hurt ourselves, someone else hurts us, and then the resentment happens because we re-feel that thing again and again and again and again. And every time we think about that thing, so I can imagine like we do something for someone else because we want to please them, because we think that it's our duty, because we think that they'll love us more if we do it, or they'll think we're great. And then none of that happens. Maybe they just ask for more from us and we feel that resentment. And then every time we think about that person, about what we're doing and what we're giving away, we just get madder and angrier and more frustrated, more depressed, more depleted. And so I love this, that you're trying to help people to see not just what love is, but what it isn't. And I think this is really critical for a conversation about the life worth living, because one of the main questions that I talk with people about is, what does it take to live a meaningful life, or what is the life worth living? And it often, the word love is used a lot, but I think a lot of times people don't know how to talk about what it is and what it isn't. Could you also share maybe a story from your own life about what love looked like to you, actual genuine love?
In my head, I'm like, okay, which story do we
I
go
know.
with? But can I first respond to what you
Of
just
course.
said? Because the example you just laid out is so real. And I love that understanding of what resentment does. And the first thing, as soon as you explain that definition of resentment, what came to me was like, well, that's not love because you are not loving yourself. And the challenge is, and that's why I think the three-legged stool piece or vision is so critical. Because let me add one more thing. And love is not transactional. So love
Mm-hmm.
doesn't look like I'm going to do this thing because I'm going to get something from it. Love that is service really is, I want to offer this. I use my agency to offer this as a gift. And so unconditional love does not look for anything in return. It is given purely out of, and that is a very hard thing for people to really accept. And because also, if you love me, you do this. Like that's a very clear thing in our culture. And so none of those things are love, because love offers us freedom. It is the freedom to
Mm-hmm.
be who we are and to be accepted exactly as we are. And the moment we have to contort ourselves to be acceptable, that is no longer love. The
Wow.
moment I feel I have to do a thing to make you love me, it is no longer love. And that's unfortunately when I talk about the deconstruction to reconstruct, that's the work. And so to go back to that point of resentment, thinking about every time I keep choosing to operate in a transaction, every time I choose to do something because I want someone to give something back to me so that I can feel valuable, all of those are self betrayals over and over and over again. And until we can get to a place of loving ourselves enough to know that I am whole and I am complete as I am, even as I am imperfect, and that I am completely loved by God exactly as this person is, and
Mm.
that there is love all around me flowing into me and from me flowing out to others, this infinite supply of love that starts first with God. Like until
Mhm.
we can get to that place of looking at love as scarce, like we haven't quite gotten there yet.
Mhm.
Um, and it's funny, I'm going to use an example of a story that literally just happened for me this week. I was traveling, had a really, exciting opportunity that I was pursuing this week, like been so focused on preparing. And which we'll get to when we talk about the loving leader framework. I was open and I was vulnerable. So I was sharing with people what I was up to. I wasn't keeping it
Mhm.
to myself. I was inviting people into this opportunity with me. I was
Mhm.
vulnerable to share because what if it doesn't turn out the way I want, right? But I practiced love and I invited people in. And I got a note from a friend before I got on the plane, sending me encouragement, just like it might have been a sentence if that long, right? And then that same friend, not even 90 minutes after I finished my last interview conversation, I got a note, how'd it go? That was love.
Absolutely.
That was love because they didn't have to do it, but I first invited them into something
Mhm.
and they held it with me,
Yeah.
and then they became so locked in, right, to what I was going through and wanting to support me through it,
Mhm.
and I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, when I say I wasn't expecting it, I wasn't because I'm so good with where I am that if no one said anything to me, I'd be fine. But the
Yeah.
beauty has been not only that one person's extent, but the number of texts that I've gotten this week. How did that go? Like I've been
Mm.
holding this with you. How did it go? That's love
Yeah.
because they don't get anything out of it, right? But they chose to hold it with me and they wanted to offer to me as a
Mhm.
gift and a support and an encouragement. And so to me, that has just been the literally most recent example of how I've seen love practice in my personal life, literally just this week.
It brings me joy to hear that from you, and there is something about when someone else tells you, it makes me realize in this moment, turning to a colleague, turning to a friend and saying, when's the last time that you experienced love? Like when you felt like someone loved you, someone showed up for you. When was that? What was that? And how you can imagine that both brings you closer to that person, but it gives you joy in your own life too. And then as I'm listening to you as well, I'm like, this is a practice that we can take up in our lives when we're thinking about, because we can forget, we can get hardened over time, we can build up resentment. But I think one of the things that counteracts that build up in our life, in our souls, that, takes, gets to them, softens us, is the ability sometimes to sit and reflect not just on the hurt that we've felt, but on the moments that we've been loved. That awakens something in us. You decided at a number of years ago, perhaps, I don't know how many years you've been doing this, but to bring love to the marketplace, to talk about love and leaders. Why? What made you think, this is the thing that I'm going to do? And because I imagine that some people are listening to this thinking love and business or love in the marketplace. I can imagine people being like, I want to be a good leader. Do I want to be a loving leader? I don't know. What would you say to
Yeah.
them?
Yeah. So you're not alone if you feel that way. Anytime I mention love and leadership, heads tilt, and they're like, I don't even understand what you mean, which is precisely actually why the loving leader framework exists because it's an entry point. It's not to say be like Jasmine. It's for our own self-reflection. But I do want to clarify something. I didn't necessarily decide this. But what ended up happening, I was on my own spiritual transformation journey, and it really was triggered by divorce. And I decided that I was going to take up my own love practice.
Mm.
And even how, as it came to me, I didn't know that that was what I was doing, but I knew that there was a desire in my heart to, as I'd like to define it, intentionally order my life around love. And so when I started from that point, what what naturally happened is that the loving leader came to work. I hadn't thought
Mm,
about it. And like literally, the loving leader came as a look back, as a reflection. But what happened was because I was the first a love practitioner transforming my own life. And then as I did that, I saw everything around me transform. And that
mm,
included my team and the organization I was a part of, which also impacted our business results. And so that's when I realized, well, like there's transformational leadership, but transformational leadership is really about, you know, the objectives of the company and empowering someone to do it. What I offer as love is a transformational leadership practice, if you want to call it that. It is way beyond just business results because you transform the humans that are in the system,
mhm.
you transform the culture of the system,
Yeah.
you transform what the system produces through value, increased value in co-creation. And the transforming agent themselves becomes transformed.
Mhm.
And every place, system, context, person that those people interact with are also transformed. And so it has this very clear rippling effect
Mhm.
as, and that's just the nature of love, but the power of it, and that is the challenge, right? Love and power often don't seem to be in the same place, but love is the power. That's
Mhm.
the thing. It's not power versus love. Love is the power because love can do way beyond we can ever do or what we could ask, think for, or imagine. It goes like when I sit back and I think about how I transformed Reebok at the time that I was there, I'm always careful to say I was an agent. I was an agent. But what actually transformed was love moving through all of those people. Like they met it with me
Mhm.
and they changed and then everything around them changed too. And that's the thing. Those are the things we can't plan. Those are the things that are outside of our control.
Mhm.
And I think that's the beautiful, beautiful nature of the power of love as a transformative leadership model. It creates way more than you could ever try to plan to, because
Mhm.
it literally transforms everything, everything, everything.
So, am I hearing you correctly when, like, so you were at Reebok,
Mm-hmm.
no big deal. No, I'm just kidding. You
Mm-hmm.
worked for Reebok, and you had a team.
Mm-hmm.
And is it that one day it sort of came to you, oh, this is what's happening on our team. I wonder if other businesses and leaders could learn from what's happening here, or if I want to
Yeah.
is it something like that?
Yeah, and that's really where the joyful disruption came from because
Okay.
the audacious goal was if this can happen here, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And I wanted us to be a light for the marketplace. So that's really where my doctoral work came in. It was after kind of seeing that moment to say, oh wait, what happened here? It's not quote unquote special to us. It can happen anywhere. It is just a matter of people willing to walk into a system and seeing it differently and being different. And so for me, it started first, yes, by how I approached leadership differently
Mm,
because I operated from a very different way. When you are looking at people as gifts and you are showing up as vulnerable and open and you are listening and you have a posture of nurturing
mhm.
and you have already done your inner work, you're going to approach those people who are under your care very differently. And they're going to feel like it's different because that's not what they're used to seeing because it's
Yeah.
countercultural.
Mhm.
And they start to change when they see it and they feel it and they're safe in it. And it allows, because I came to work as my full self, it invited them to come to work as their full self. And as we all kept doing that together, the way we tackled problems changed. The way we had this creative idea of what the future could be and how we could be how we could be greater together changed because we all felt free. Like you didn't hold back an idea because you weren't afraid of what somebody would think about you. You just say it out loud. And we could work together on how we could institute those great ideas and it transformed the results. And then also for me, in that particular instance, I was invited to lead a corporate initiative at the time was called United Against Racism. And I was leading change management and had no playbook other than love. And so as I brought that playbook into this work, I created this platform called Courageous Conversations. And really what it is a collective practice of love, right? Of being in community and proximity and learning from each other's stories and transforming in the presence of another. That was love at work. Yeah. And so as the rest of the organization transformed, so now it wasn't that I just transformed my own team that I led. I was now an influencer of the entire organization and shaping the culture of the organization and the behaviors of the organization. And so we were all moving with this different kind of heartbeat. Yeah. And it really transformed what we were able to do collectively together. And so again, that's what love looks like. I mean, one of my biggest things, so yes, I mentioned lovelessness, but the other thing is fear is what is the clear norm of the workplace. And I am all about dismantling fear, right? Because love is greater than fear, and so what does it look like to say, no, I'm not going to practice fear. I'm actually going to choose to practice love. You're going to bear different fruit. And what is true is that we already have all the data that tells us about the fruit that fear bears in the marketplace. And it is, right, the mental health crisis that we're facing and the emphasis of it in the workplace. It is all of the depression and the loneliness and the anxiety and all of those things. And all the data that talks about that our managers impact our mental health equal to our spouses. And right, this like real data. There's another research project that says the number one thing that creates fear in the workplace, 68% of these respondents said was what their manager thought of them. We're clear that the fruit is not good. It doesn't bear good fruit. And so, well, what if you change that cultural norm to love? What fruit would that bear? And so that's where I look at what happened during that leadership period to say we can produce something different. We can produce different results. We do not have to do it this way. And that's what I usually say. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be fear. It doesn't have to be. May have been for a really long time. We may have become real used to it. It doesn't have to be this way. And we can choose to be different.
I love everything you're saying. I'm really on board. And I imagine that other people listening are too. They're like, I want to be on a team like that, or I want to lead in this way. You do have this Loving Leader Praxis community. It's an 8-week cohort, right? Is this the kind of thing that, could you say more about what this experience is? If you want to be a more loving leader, who is it for? And what is this experience like?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. So first, it was one of those things that it's about, okay, we're doing a lot of harm to people in the workplace.
Yeah.
Like that's really clear. Evidence, data, very clear. So what would it look like to help shape loving leaders? That was really what the question was. And so it was everywhere I spoke, right? Like all the different keynotes, you would see people like I could watch them transforming as they heard me speak. You could see their hearts opening and softening. They would come up to me after and like, oh, like I want to do more. How do I do this? How can we get together? And so this practice community was really created for that, to have a place where people can start to really take in what it means to be a loving leader. And so it's an 8-week praxis community. Praxis is all about reflection and action. So we are being very thoughtful about how we are leading, what kind of context that we're in, what are the challenges that we're facing, what's coming up for us as we're doing it, what do we see coming at us, and then what, if we use the loving leader framework, what action can we actually take? I love the idea of experimenting. We try things and we learn and we get data from those things.
Mhm.
And so that idea of I'm going to make a conscious choice not to operate in fear. I'm going
Mhm.
to look at this situation through a lens of love. What would love invite me to do? And then I'm going to go do it. And then I'm going to come back and reflect on actually what happened.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to, if I have to tweet, I'm going to keep trying it. And that starts to changes the agent and changes the context because it has an impact on the people who we are leading. When we are focusing on love. So it's 8 weeks
Mhm.
because we do an intro and an outro, if you want it, where we can be very reflective on the whole journey. But the
Mhm.
6 weeks in between takes each letter of the loving leader framework and it allows us to essentially workshop everybody's real life work situations through each one of the aspects of the framework. And it's purposely done in community. It is
Yeah.
purposely done in community because as my pastor says, we do not grow in isolation, we grow in community. And also, we don't love in isolation. Trust
Yeah.
the love scholar who could think and write and research about love all day. It is not until you put it into practice with other people that it really becomes the work of love. And so
Mhm.
that idea of being able to have a community of like-minded folks that have the same intention and you're wrestling together
Mhm.
through this challenge and we get to look at it through each other's views and ways of living and seeing. And then we get to take all of that with us. And then we always have this safe place to come back to,
Yeah.
to help us try again. And so I'm really excited about it, really excited about it. And again, that idea of, we'll use the marketplace word of scaling. Like if we could scale loving leadership, it's by being able to influence people where they are so that they then go out and then shape their context. And so that's really the thought process and the philosophy behind it.
I'd love to shift gears a little bit to it's related, but Richard Rohr says there are two ways to transformation. One is great love, the other is
Mhm.
great suffering.
Yeah, it's so funny.
But
I just had this quote come up to me like literally last week. Anyway, carry on.
I I I call yeah, to quote Carl Jung, I call that synchronicity.
Yeah.
And synchronicity for
Another favorite of mine.
yeah, synchronicity for me is one of the major ways that God talks to me. So I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, what are you saying, God?
Mhm. Mhm.
So great suffering. Could you
Mhm.
talk about for you how you think about suffering and what it means to respond well to it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I also define myself as a wounded healer.
Mm,
And so suffering has definitely been the pathway to love for me. Was literally in the suffering that the opening of the fact that there was it was love greater than I had yet to understand was available. And so that it was definitely through that kind of dark place. And also, I would add to it not just the suffering, but also grief. And so for me, and it's interesting, I've shared this with people. When I sought out, right, to create a ministry in love, I was not thinking about grief at the time. I
mm,
was thinking about the obstacles to love, like unforgiveness, judgment, um, not accepting people, being closed and fixed in all of those kinds of barriers. I had not thought about grief. And so it was only through my own journey of suffering and loss and learning firsthand what it is for the God of love who mends broken hearts.
mm,
If that wasn't my felt like lived experience,
mhm,
I wouldn't able to be the love practitioner that I am because it literally like I had to. And I use had to, like Jesus had to go through Samaria. Like I had to go through the suffering and the grief that I had. I had to have the broken heart that I had to be able to identify with the suffering of others. And so, yes, I was clear about love that was compassionate and empathetic and for sure, but it's when your heart has been broken and healed again that you have a deep, deep honor and respect for the brokenhearted, and that you can hold them in their love, in love and in grief, in their dark, deep places. There's a capacity that you get. You know, you get to do this because you yourself have been healed and transformed. And it's not far off and away. It's real close to you because you've lived it yourself. And so for me, even grief in that what I thought was the grief that and the heartbreak that I thought I could never do, like I had never had anything like this before, thought I could never withstand anything else. And then for me, my lifelong best friend and cousin, we're 5 weeks apart, suddenly died. Not sick, just not here anymore. And but to know that the grief that I had been healed through and strengthened through before, it held me in that grief. And that grief is love. And so even in the loss, there is a beauty and a deepened purpose, respect for purpose. Like I know I get to be here because this work of love is really important. And so there's just a sense of urgency that I now have, and a sense of purpose, deepened purpose that I have now because I suffered that great loss.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is if we allow it to,
yes,
suffering can actually, and grief can actually be integral to a good, meaningful life. If we allow it, we can allow it to make our lives more meaningful, more beautiful, more truthful. And I lament with you that your best friend passed away so suddenly, and also just passed away. Period. What was her name?
Elise.
Elise. What was Elise like?
Goodness. So first of all, Elise was a broadcaster here in New York, and so she was also a celebrity. It's like trying to honor a celebrity who was so beloved by the city is no easy task. But the community came together. You know, we came together. But you know, she's a griot. You know, I always say she's a griot, like she's a storyteller, and she is a lover of music. And so she used to offer these. So she was a meteorologist here in New York, but she also did this show that focused on like the blast from the past and, stories of musicians and stuff that she would bring their stories back to us. And she and we used to go to camp together when we were little kids. And so, we performed all the time. We were folk dancers when we were kids. And so we danced together. And her mother used to always joke that when we would come home for camp, like leave them on the corner so they can just sit and tell their stories all day long. At any moment that we were together, we would burst out in song. And so that was actually, I think, one of the best moments is that right before she passed, she had just moved into a new home. And she was so focused, almost to a point where I was like, do you have to do this? She was like, yes, I want people over. And so she ended up having like a little wine tasting event at her home. And, we're sitting around the table, and then randomly something from camp came out. And the two of us just bursted out in song. And so in hindsight, that was my last time with her. And so the people who were with us were like, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful I got to witness that. Because that's us, So yeah, so she always had something to say. But I will say one of the things that she has taught me, and I literally said it just as recent as yesterday. And she got this from the Landmark Forum. whatever is happening, there is nothing wrong here. So it's all about the way we see it. It's all about how we frame it. Then it goes right back to your point about suffering and grief and how it can transform it if we allow it. It's the constant part of love is letting go.
Yeah.
That ability to let go, not to cling onto things for dear life. So we can grieve it.
Yeah.
But love is pulling us forward. And so how do we use our agency to move through that flow? And that's what you said about synchronicity. And that's what I'm doing when I'm sitting quiet in the morning for hours. I'm seeing the dots connect and I know exactly where to go. I know where love is calling me to. But we don't get quiet enough.
Yeah.
We don't get quiet enough. We don't trust what we're hearing enough. And that's where inner love comes from. Part of loving myself comes from, because when I really, really take the time to love and honor myself, when that inner knowledge comes, I trust it and I go. I'm not sitting here doubting myself. Did you hear that right? I know it. And I move and I lean right into it. So all of this is all of the dots of the conversation we've had really have just come together so beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really inspired and moved by what you're saying right now in a personal way in my own life. I was up late last night questioning a bunch of things, just kind of reeling in fear and questioning. And this is so helpful to me as just like trusting myself, loving myself through fear, through questions. I'm also wondering, the last question I have for you, I wish I could ask you a million more, but one other piece that I think has been really critical to life worth living, when I talk with people about what makes life worth living, other than suffering, the other barrier for them a lot of times is failure, is feeling like I failed to become the person that I hoped I would be. I failed this person, or I failed in this way massively, or I made this decision that I regret. I made this mistake. And you were talking about reframing suffering and grief. I wonder, how do you think we should respond to failure? What does what does love say to failure?
Oh, I love this question about failure. When I think about it, I think failure can often be connected to our expectation, and expectations are connected to the way we hope things can be.
Yeah.
The challenge is we often are so stuck on the way that we wanted it to be that it keeps us from seeing what is and what is available to us. So failure, and if you think about it from an experimenting perspective, it's data, right? And you're learning from the data. And it's interesting. I was just thinking about it yesterday. Sometimes that failure is actually redirection to say, maybe that way. Like we can be so headstrong, like it still look like this. I want it to be like that. And that's all control.
Wow.
And what love is, that I know to be true, is surrender. And so the fact that this life could be going in a path because I'm called to be a particular way, but I thought it was supposed to be this other way. The failure could be because it doesn't look like what we thought it. But really, what it is our resistance to relinquish control. If we can look at the failure as data, right, as an opportunity to say, I love bringing curiosity to all these things. And to me, that's where the love and that grace for ourselves comes from. And instead of the beating ourselves up for whatever failure, like I use a perfect example. I was in an interview cycle and I literally hit 3 big opportunities. And the person was like, oh, I'm going to end up with 3 offers. This is going to be cool. And all of a sudden, none of them came through. And I was just like, well, that's weird. And instead of taking it as failure,
Mm-hmm.
I had to really look at the fact of that's really not where you're supposed to go for several different reasons. So can we have an honest conversation with ourselves about this? Can we trust that this is not where we're supposed to be, even
Yeah.
if you wanted it to be? And so what might it look like for you to relinquish control of this outcome and allow where where you synchronicity would show you is where you're headed toward? So I just really have approached, like when I always, one of the letters in the loving leader framework, right, is open. I really try to embrace life with this very open handedness, in that
Yeah.
I can sense where I think it might be going, but I don't have such a grip on it that I'm trying to control and manipulate it to get to that. But the seeds start to bear fruit, right? And so part of the failure piece is what's happening with the seeds that have been planted, and maybe are we not watering the right crop, or harvesting the right crop. But it's data. It's really just data. It's like, don't take it personally. It's what can you learn from it? How do you take that learning, and how does it drive you forward or guide you forward?
Jasmine, I have been asking people about failure for 8 years.
Oh my goodness.
That is my favorite answer anyone's ever given me.
Oh.
No offense to anybody else I've talked to about. No, but that was so beautiful. I'm going to be thinking about that for many days to come. I am probably going to copy it, borrow it, and quote on a regular basis. I'm going to quote you on a regular basis now for the rest of my life on that, because
It's looking
literally,
at failure through the lens of love. Through the
yes, that's what I'm
lens
saying.
of love.
I've never thought about that. I've never thought about that. And the way that you said, the opposite of love is fear. The opposite of love is control. The opposite of love is manipulation. It makes so much
Domination,
sense.
all the things.
Yeah, that of course, then we would have this relationship to failure that was so bad for our souls.
Yeah.
And so, oh my goodness, the life worth living can be found in allowing love to transform the way that we see failure. Absolutely. Like, I'm hearing that in what you're saying. If you're like me and you want Jasmine to be your spiritual director now, if you want her to consult, if you want to go to the loving leader, you want to be a part of this cohort experience, you'll be able to find her in a link to her website and her socials in the guest notes. Jasmine, it has been absolutely a beautiful time with you this morning. Like,
Thank you.
I'm so grateful that you have given me your time today, and you've really ministered to my soul, and I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You are a gift. Thank you for having me.